Hello Year 10s. I know you've been struggling with the texture videos, or rather I don't know you're struggling with them, I know that they're difficult to understand. So here's a breath of fresh air, something easy. Structure. So all of these things on the board at the moment are different types of structure. There are a few others that I'm not going to write down now. And the good news is that you can't be expected to spot a structure just by listening to a short clip. Whereas with texture or harmony or melody, they'll be saying, listen to this, describe the texture, describe the harmony, describe the melody. But with structure, if you're not listening to the whole piece, you cannot possibly know how it's structured. It's a bit like being inside a hotel room, but you don't know what the outside of the building looks like. So you can zoom in as much as you like, but you can't tell what the structure of the whole thing is like unless you get given the whole thing. So the good news is you just really need to be able to remember the structure for each piece. Now, the Bach is ternary. Another way of expressing that is A, B, A. Ternary means 3 sections. Binary is 2 sections. Now, none of the pieces we're studying are actually in binary form, but you need to know what binary form is because you have to compose. And one of the easiest and most common forms or structures, so structure is the same as form. They're really the same area, we just have 2 words for it. Structure or form. So binary is a section of music and another section of music which contrasts normally in some way. So we're going to have a look at contrast in a second to really understand why we need structures at all. Ternary is a piece of music, a contrasting section of music, and then something that returns to the same as the first section. So this could be exactly the same, or it could be slightly different, but the A sections are effectively the same music, and the B section will contrast in some way. Now the Bach is in ABA form or ternary form, you can say it either way, and we need to be able to recognise the B section. We've done lots of work on the A section. Well, the B section in this piece doesn't contrast hugely. It's got a slightly different melody. We're not looking at that today, and a different key, and that's important. But we'll look at that separately another day. We're not looking at the Bach structure particularly. We're looking at what structure means. Variation form. None of the pieces that we are studying is in variation form. So why am I even mentioning it? Well, in September, at the start of Year 11, the exam board give all the schools a piece of paper with 4 possible options for a composition, and you have to do one of them. You get to choose from the 4. This year, variation form was one of the possible compositions you could do. So you have to really know what that form is. Variation form is quite simple. We have a melody, and we play it very simply, and then we play a slightly more elaborate or fancy version of the melody, normally with some faster notes and showing off a bit. And then we might do the melody bit in a minor key, and then we might do the melody in the left hand of a piano with another melody in the right hand, and then we might do a slow version of the melody, and then we might do a really showing off version of the melody, really fast notes, lots of scales and arpeggios decorating around the melody. That's variation form, and it's possible that it's going to be set as a composition. It is just about possible that they will put something in the exam for you to comment on that is variation form, because this is one of the few forms that we can actually listen to a little chunk and see a short melody and a variation. So this one, it is sort of possible to recognise by looking and listening at a short extract. Sonata form is really complicated. And we are doing a piece in sonata form, the Beethoven, which is the next piece we do. So we are starting, remember, with the 2 hardest pieces to learn, because we can come back and learn them later in Year 11 when your understanding about all the other set works is in place, and that will act as a scaffold for you to come back to these pieces, and it'll be so much easier the second time. So sonata form is a complex set of rules. Remember fugue? Well, you shouldn't actually. You should remember fugal, because the Bach is also fugal. Well, a fugue is a piece that obeys all of the rules of the specific subject, answer, counter subject, and then the way those things carry on interacting for the rest of the piece. And a fugue will carry on doing that. Well, a fugal passage starts doing that and then breaks down into a slightly freer version of that. So the Bach is both in ternary form, also known as ABA, but it also has a fugal opening. So we're not doing fugues in any other piece. We've got all that complex stuff here, but it's important that you know a fugue has got a subject and an answer played later with a counter subject, and then obeys a strict set of rules to carry on writing those parts in the same way. Verse chorus is a nice obvious one. Pop songs are generally in verse chorus form. So are a lot of musicals. So Defying Gravity, when we come to do that, is verse chorus. Killer Queen is verse chorus. And to some extent Release, which we're also looking at, is verse chorus. We're also doing Samba en Preludio, which is a jazz piece, and that's sort of got two melodies. We're not going to call it verse chorus. So verse chorus is going to come up a lot. Sonata form we'll leave for the Beethoven. The Bach is in ternary form. There are other pieces that we're going to do in ternary form. The Star Wars is slightly complicated because the music is written for the film. So the structure of that is what scene comes next, what scene comes after that, what action comes after that. So the music is structured by the action on the screen, except the opening of the main melody is in ternary form. So we're going to see this ternary form, ABA, come up quite a bit. So we're going to now look at what the B section is like in ternary form. What can you do with it? So we said that texture is how parts fit together. So if we've got a violin part, and then on its own that would be monophonic texture, and if we've got a flute part that gets added afterwards, that would be two-part texture, maybe counterpoint, and maybe all those other texture words. So texture is how parts fit together vertically, okay? Structure is how the music fits together horizontally throughout the time of the piece. It starts like this, then we have this type of melody, and then we do that. So structure is something that describes the progress of the music, and texture is something that describes a slice of the music at any one point. So if we zoom in on a piece of music and we have a look at all the different parts playing, we can look at the texture, a bit like cutting through a really clever coloured cake and really seeing what's going on at each layer. But structure is to do with time. So at 0 minutes and 0 seconds, and then maybe at 3 minutes and 10 seconds, let's say, and then maybe at 6 minutes, or however long our piece is. Okay? So structure is like this. So if we've got ternary form, we can pretty much guarantee that this music is going to sound very, very similar. In fact, that's a good thing, because everything we learn for this opening is going to be true when it comes again. So we don't have to learn it twice. That's great. And I've said the B section will be contrasting. So we're going to have a quick run through ways that we can contrast. We could have a different tempo. So maybe the B section could be slower. That's contrast. If we have fast, slow, fast, that would be contrast. That doesn't happen in the Bach. It's the same tempo. we could have a different time signature. And these are things that you can think about doing for your compositions when you've run out of ideas. It's very easy. It's not easy at all. It's easy to understand that you're going to write a 16-bar tune. Now, developing that 16-bar tune into 32 bars or longer is really hard. And it's better to think, I'll write a 16-bar tune and then I'll write a contrasting tune. And that way you're constantly coming up with new ideas and it's easier than developing your ideas. So we're looking for contrast, different time signature. So it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like a waltz in the middle. That would be contrast. Those are quite big contrasts, and maybe that's quite difficult to do in a piece because you might lose coherence, the way it sticks together, if your contrast is too big. We don't want to stop, have something completely different. We don't want a piece of classical music, a piece of rock music, and then a piece of classical music. Okay, that would be too contrasting. We want contrast, but that is able to thread its way through. So these are good things to do, but it doesn't happen in the Bach. It could be a different key. Now this is very common, and this is very common in binary music as well. We might go from the tonic to the dominant. So if we're in C, the B section could be in G. So it could be a different, spell it right, different key. And that would be a good contrast because you'd have to hear something here that starts to change key. And we'll look at that in the Beethoven. What else could it be? It could be different orchestration. So in other words, the A section could be lots of trumpets and trombones, as in the Star Wars, playing military stuff, and the B music could be a contrast played on the violins. And then the A music could be the brass again. So different orchestration. That means different instruments playing, that's all it means. But I said something here about the rhythms. So we could have different mood. And then we'd have to look at how that mood is achieved. So the mood could be that we've got really heavy driving triplets, like an army marching to war. And then we could have something smooth and slow, not the pulse could keep driving, but the actual note values in the melody could be slower. So da-ga-da-dum, bum, ba-ba-bum, da-ga-da-dum, bum, ba-ba-ba, dee-da-dee, dee-da-dee. So we could have longer note values in the B section and then back to the rhythms there. So the different mood could be achieved by different types of rhythms. So maybe dotted rhythms and long notes, fast notes, slow notes. The other way it could be different is that this could be big intervals, bum ba bum, bum ba bum, and this could be small intervals, bum ba dee da dee, bum ba dee da da. So that's sort of moving, bum ba dee da da, moving by step all close together, and this is moving in big intervals. So that could be a contrast. Disjunct, big intervals, conjunct, moving by step. That's another way of having contrast, conjunct or disjunct. Good. So, there's one more thing I want to look at. I said we could have a different key. That's a great idea. But I also said we're going to go from C major to G major, and that's a different key. How about if we went from a major key to a minor key? So a minor key could be a slightly more serious mood. I don't like the happy, sad descriptions of major and minor because it's perfectly possible to have a happy piece in a minor key or a serious sad, important piece in a major key. Lots of other things like the choice of instruments, the choice of tempo, the choice of basically high notes or basically low notes, they can all change the mood too. But if we go from major to minor, that is called a change of tonality. And you will hear that in the Bach. We go from D major to B minor to D major. Now we're going to look at how majors and minors are related. We've done it in year 9, but we're going to have a closer look in another video to make sure you remember how to do that. But contrast from the A section to the B section to the A section again in the Bach is a really good thing to do in your compositions. Take a key, go to a minor key, come back to your original key. And that is called the relative minor only when there is a special relationship between that key and that key. So it's not just that this is minor, it's also related in some way to this major key. And when we have D major, which is 2 sharps, and B minor, which is 2 sharps, they are related. So we've had a look at structure, we've had a look at the simplest structure of all, binary form, then ternary form, which is ABA, which is our Bach, and several of other pieces. We've looked at some other structures briefly, like variation form, remembering what a fugue is, giving you the heads up that sonata form is going to be really complicated, and verse chorus form. So we understand that form is actually quite a simple thing to get your head around. You just have to remember the form, the structure for each piece. Here's a big tip. When you're trying to learn the set works, you should be able to, in your head, completely cold, remember exactly how the start of each section goes in the structure. So when we come to Defying Gravity, you will need to know how the chorus starts in Defying Gravity so that you can recognize it every time you hear it. Is it the verse? Is it the chorus? And when we get to Killer Queen, you're going to need to know which is the verse, which is the chorus. And the best way of doing that is listening to it over and over again until you can just think, the chorus goes like this, the verse goes like this, and didn't click so well. So if you cannot sing in your head the way they sound, then you haven't learned the piece thoroughly enough yet. And then you just have to listen to it again. So for here, we're going to look at the B section of the Bach in the next video, or the one after that. But when we look at the structure of the Bach, you're going to be able to know that the A section goes ba-dum ba-diddle-diddle-dee-dum, whereas the B section goes ba-dum ba-da-da, and that ba-da is much more lyrical, much gentler than diddle-dee-diddle-dee-dum. A section ba-dum ba-diddle-dee-diddle-dee-dum, B section ba-da-da-da-da. Get that in your head.